Chapter 12. There is a correspondence of all things of heaven with all things of man. At the present day it is not known what correspondence is. There are several reasons for this. The chief one is that man has withdrawn himself from heaven by the love of self and the world. For he who loves himself and the world above all things regards only worldly things because they are pleasing to the external senses and gratify his inclination, and he does not regard spiritual things because they are pleasing to the internal senses and gratify the mind. Therefore he casts these things aside, saying that they are too high to think about. The case was different with the ancient peoples. To them, the knowledge of correspondences was the chief of all knowledges. By means of it, they also derived intelligence and wisdom, and by means of it, those who were of the church had communication with heaven. For the knowledge of correspondence is an angelic knowledge. The most ancient people, who were celestial men, thought from correspondence itself, like the angels. So they also spoke with angels, and so the Lord was frequently seen by them and instructed them. But at the present day, that knowledge has been so completely lost that it is not known what correspondence is. Since then, without a perception of what correspondence is, it is impossible for anything to be known clearly about the spiritual world, or of its influx into the natural world, or even of what the spiritual is in relation to the natural, or anything with clearness about the spirit of man, which is called the soul, and of its operation into the body, or yet of the state of man after death. It is necessary, therefore, to explain what correspondence is and what is its nature. So also is the way prepared for what is to follow. First, it will be stated what correspondence is. The whole natural world corresponds to the spiritual world. Not only the natural world in general, but also in every particular. Therefore, whatever in the natural world comes into existence from the spiritual world is said to be in correspondence with it. It must be known that the natural world comes into existence and continues in existence from the spiritual world, precisely like an effect from its effecting cause. By the natural world is meant everything in its whole extent that is under the sun, receiving heat and light from it, and all things that continue in existence therefrom belong to that world. But the spiritual world is heaven, and all things in the heavens belong to that world. Since man is both a heaven and a world in least form, after the image of the greatest, there is therefore with him both a spiritual and a natural world. Interior things which belong to his mind and relate to the understanding and the will make his spiritual world, while exterior things which belong to his body and relate to its senses and actions make his natural world. Consequently, whatever in his natural world, that is, in his body and its senses and actions, comes into existence from his spiritual world, that is, from his mind and its understanding and will, is said to be a correspondence thereof. What correspondence is may be seen from the human face. In a face, which has not been taught to dissemble, all the affections of the mind come to view in a natural form as in their image. This is why the face is said to be the index of the mind. That is, it is man's spiritual world presented in his natural world. In the same way, the things pertaining to the understanding present themselves in speech, and those pertaining to the will present themselves in the movements of the body. All things, therefore, that are done in the body, whether in the face, in speech, or in bodily movements, are called correspondences. From these observations may also be seen what the internal man is and what the external man. Namely, the internal man is what is called the spiritual man, and the external what is called the natural man. Also that the one is distinct from the other as heaven is from the world, and further that all things that take place and come into existence in the external or natural man take place and come into existence from the internal or spiritual. The foregoing has been said about the correspondence of man's internal or spiritual with his external or natural. But in the pages now following, the correspondence of the whole heaven with every part of man is now to be treated of. It has been shown that the entire heaven resembles one man, and that it is a man in image, and is therefore called the grand man. It has also been shown that the angelic societies of which heaven consists are accordingly arranged as are the members, organs, and viscera in a man. That is, some are in the head, some in the breast, some in the arms, and some in each particular part of those. Consequently, the societies in any member there correspond to the same member in man. Those in the head there correspond to the head in man. Those in the breast there to the breast in man. Those in the arms there to the arms in man, and so on with all the rest. It is from this correspondence that man continues in existence, for he does so from no other source than heaven. That heaven is distinguished into two kingdoms, of which one is called the celestial, the other the spiritual, may be seen above in the relevant section. The celestial kingdom corresponds in general to the heart and to all things of the heart in the whole body, and the spiritual kingdom to the lungs and to all things of the lungs in the whole body. Likewise in man, heart and lungs form two kingdoms, the heart ruling there by means of arteries and veins, the lungs by means of the nerve and motor fibres, both together in every exertion and movement. So again, in any one man, in his spiritual world called his spiritual man, there are two kingdoms, one of the will and the other of the understanding. The will rules by means of affections of good, and the understanding by means of affections of truth. These kingdoms indeed correspond to the kingdoms of the heart and the lungs in the body. It is the same in the heavens. The celestial kingdom is the voluntary part of heaven, and the good of love rules there. The spiritual kingdom is the intellectual part of heaven, and truth rules there. All this corresponding to the functions of the heart and lungs in man. It is on account of this correspondence that in the word the heart signifies the will and also the good of love, and the breath of the lungs signifies the understanding and the truth of faith. For the same reason, affections are ascribed to the heart, although they are neither in it nor derived from it. The correspondence of the two kingdoms of heaven with the heart and lungs is the general correspondence of heaven with man. There is a less general correspondence with each one of his members, organs and viscera, the nature of which will also be noted. In the grand man, which is heaven, those in the head excel others in every good, for they are in love, peace, innocence, wisdom, intelligence, and the consequent joy and happiness. These inflow into the head and into those things belonging to the head with a man, and correspond to them. In the grand man, which is heaven, those who are in the breast are in the good of charity and faith, and they, in like manner, inflow into the breast of man and correspond to it. Those, however, who in the grand man or heaven are in the loins and the organs devoted to generation are in conjugal love. Those in the feet are in the lowest good of heaven, which is called spiritual natural good. Those in the arms and hands are in the power of truth from good. Those in the eyes are in understanding. Those in the ears are in attention and obedience. Those in the nostrils are in perception. Those in the mouth and tongue are in the ability to converse from understanding and perception. Those in the kidneys are in truth, searching, separating, and correcting. Those in the liver, pancreas, and spleen are in various purifications of good and truth, and so with the rest. Those inflow into the like things of man and correspond to them. The influx of heaven is into the functions and uses of the bodily members. And since the uses are from the spiritual world, they take on a form by means of such things as are in the natural world, and thus present themselves in effect. From this is correspondence. For the same reason, these members, organs, and viscera have a like significance in the word, for everything there has a meaning in accordance with correspondences. Thus the head signifies intelligence and wisdom, the breast, charity, the loins, conjugal love, the arms and hands, the power of truth, the feet, what is natural, the eyes, understanding, the nostrils, perception, the ears, obedience, the kidneys, the examination of truth, and so on. Hence also, in common speech, it is usual to say of one who is intelligent and wise that he has a head, of one who is in charity that he is a bosom friend, of one who has perception that he is keen-scented, of one who is in intelligence that he is sharp-sighted, of one who is powerful, that he is long-handed, of one who wills from love, that it is done from the heart. These and many other sayings in man's speech are from correspondences. For such things are from the spiritual world, although man does not know it. That there is such a correspondence of all things of heaven with all things of man has been shown to me by much experience, by so much as to convince me of it as of an evident fact admitting no doubt. But it is not necessary here to bring forward all that experience, nor does its abundance permit of doing so. It may be seen set forth in Arcana Celestia, where correspondences, representations, the influx of the spiritual world into the natural world, and the intercourse of the soul and the body are treated of. Now, although all bodily things of man correspond to all things of heaven, yet it is not in respect of his external form that man is an image of heaven, but in respect of his internal form. For the interiors of man receive heaven, and his exteriors receive the world. So far, therefore, as his interiors receive heaven, man is, in respect of them, a heaven in least form, after the image of the greatest. But so far as his interiors do not receive heaven, he is not an image of heaven, and an image of the greatest. Nevertheless, his exteriors, which receive the world, can be in a form in accordance with the order of the world, and thus variously beautiful. For outward beauty which pertains to the body is derived from parents and from formation in the womb, and is afterwards preserved by a general influx from the world. Hence it is that the form of one's natural man differs greatly from the form of his spiritual man. Several times I have been shown what was the form of man's spirit, and in some who were beautiful and charming in appearance, the spirit was seen to be so deformed, black and monstrous that you would call it an image of hell, not of heaven. While in others not beautiful in outward form, there was a spirit beautifully formed, pure and angelic. Moreover, the spirit of man after death appears such as it was in the body when living in the world. But correspondence extends far more widely than to man, for there is a correspondence of the heavens with one another. To the third or inmost heaven, the second or middle heaven corresponds, and to the second or middle heaven, the first or outermost heaven corresponds, and this corresponds to the bodily forms in man called his members, organs, and viscera. Thus it is the bodily parts of man in which heaven finally terminates, and upon which it stands firm upon its base. But this arcanum will be fully unfolded elsewhere. A truth that must by all means be known is that all correspondence with heaven is with the Lord's divine human, because heaven is from him and he is heaven, as has been shown in previous sections. For if the divine human did not inflow into all things of the world, there would be neither angel nor man. From this, again, it is evident why the Lord became man, and clothed his divine with a human from first to last. It was because the divine human, which was the source of heaven before the Lord's coming, was no longer sufficient to sustain all things, for the reason that man, who is the foundation of the heavens, had weakened and destroyed order. The nature and quality of the divine human, which was before the coming of the Lord, and what the condition of heaven was at that time, may be seen in collected extracts appended to the preceding section. Angels are amazed when they hear that there are men who attribute all things to nature and nothing to the divine, and who also believe that one's body, into which so many wonders of heaven are gathered, is a product of nature. Still more are they amazed that the rational part of man is believed to be from nature, when, if man will but raise their minds a little, they can see that such things are from the divine and not from nature, and that nature has been created simply for clothing the spiritual and for presenting it in a corresponding form in the ultimate of order. Such men they liken to owls, which see in darkness, but in light see nothing.